How about this? Freddie Roach, now 1-0 as a UFC cornerman, one of the greatest boxing trainers of all time, right there in George's corner, celebrating with him. An amazing moment. Wanted to talk to him about that experience, and he's kind enough to join us on the phone right now. Freddie, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Thank you so much for the time, Freddie, and congratulations to you and the team. So what was it like? What was it like being in your first UFC fight as a cornerman, and it's Georges St-Pierre, 4-year layoff, and he becomes champion like that, with, you know, the big punch that leads to the submission. Just as a guy who has been around the fight game for so long, countless title fights in boxing, first UFC experience, what was it like?
It was great. I mean, it was really a great promotion, and you know, like the girl fight before it, she did tremendous, and you know, we get to watch it from the locker room, and you know, and her knockout loss got us to get warmed up a little bit early and make sure that we're ready to go for our fight. And you know, George fought a really good fight. He listened very well, and I'm really happy with the performance. We worked really hard for this fight. I went up to Montreal. I made about 6 or 7 trips up there to work 3 days a week with George, and then you know, I had to come back home to work at my gym also. So it was a lot of work, a lot of flying, and a lot of airtime. And then the last 2 weeks, I was with George the entire time, and you know, from Montreal to New York, and then the big show in the Madison Square Garden, the best arena in the world.
As a cornerman, the experience of being there for a boxing match with the ring and how it's configured as opposed to an MMA fight with the cage, and I think you're a little further back, I would imagine it's different. Did you find it harder to corner someone in an MMA fight as opposed to a boxing match?
You know, it wasn't really. It was actually a little bit easier because, you know, there's 2 people allowed into the cage, and it was me and Faraz, and you know, Faraz it was his team. He was the lead guy, and you know, I'm used to being quiet, and I listened to Faraz, and Faraz would be giving him instructions, and then he said, "Freddie, you're up." And then from that point, I knew it was my job to give George the best instruction I could. I didn't want to give him too much, like I don't do with fighters. I gave him one thing to do each round, and he listened very well, and it worked. Everything worked out great. I mean, I told him the overhand right was looking good for him, but now the opponent's countering with his right hand, so you've got to come back with a left hook, and the left hook was the key.
Usually when you're cornering one of your many champions, you're the lead guy, but in this case, as you said, Faraz was the lead guy. Was that difficult for you to be essentially number 2 and to kind of step back a little bit?
No, you know, I know that you know, he knows a lot more about the ground game and so forth. And, you know, George's stand-up was great in this fight, yes, but the thing is, I still know where his best game is, and I would never take that away from him. So I would let them discuss that, and they would give his I didn't really understand the instructions he gave so much because they were mostly in French. And you know, but I just gave him what I saw, and you know, I only give him one thing at a time, and just something he can absorb. And you know, he would grab the water and give himself a drink of water, and then pour some on his head a little bit. So it was a very you're right in there with the fighter. You're into the cage, so you get him. You get his attention really easy. So it was a good environment to be in.
George looked great in the first round. I thought he won the first round. I thought that Michael won the second, and it seemed like he was getting a little tired going into the third. Did you see that as well, and were you getting concerned?
I was getting a little bit concerned. It was obviously a fast-paced fight, and he did box very well in the first round, and I was very happy with it. And, you know, Bisping is a very tough opponent. He came back in the second and made it a little more difficult with us and started countering our right hand with his right hand. And that's where I saw that the left hook would work because he's a little bit lazy in bringing it back. He brings it back a little bit too low. And so I just, told her George was fresh enough to absorb that and to listen to the corner. The fight 5-minute round is very demanding, and we did that in sparring and so forth. And he was ready for it. But the thing is, he was getting maybe a little bit tired. But the thing is, I think just going into the fight and moving up in the weight division. I'm not sure if that's his best weight division or if we'll fight there again. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, did you think it was because of the layoff or because of the added weight that he was getting tired? Because George isn't necessarily known as one of those guys who gasses, especially that early.
Yeah, I think it was the weight that got to him a little bit. Used to carrying that much weight. I think it fatigued him a little bit quicker than usual. But again, we'll work everything out, and we'll all get together and discuss what's the best move next for George.
Prior to the fight, one of GSP's longtime mentors, a guy by the name of Christophe Midou, did an interview saying that George was not looking good in sparring, that he was not in favor of this fight. From what you saw, were you confident going into the fight? Were you happy with George's preparation given the layoff? Did you feel like he was ready for this, doing the right things in training?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, I don't remember him being in training camp for sparring and so forth. And I was at the last 3 sparring sessions, and he was sparring really, really good for this fight. And I think that was the key behind it. And his stand-up game. We weren't supposed to be the better boxer than Bisping. He was supposed to be a better boxer than we are, but George proved that to be wrong in the first round. He outboxed him really, really well. And, the overhand right was working really well. And I told him he's countering with the right hand on the overhand right. If you come back with the left hook, you'll have it. And he went out, and that's what finished his opponent. And then, obviously the chokeout at the end.
Was that your first time attending a UFC event? I know it was your first time as a cornerman, but was that your first time actually in the building for a UFC event?
For UFC, yes, that was my first time. It was a really exciting show. It was a lot of fun. Even in the locker room, watching the other fights, we had monitors and so forth, and there were some great fights on that show. It was really, really promoted well, and I think everybody left enjoying something. I mean, they promoted the show very well.
Yeah, of course, I remember when you cornered Andrei Arlovsky against Fyodor Emelianenko in Affliction, but I was just curious, like, as someone who's been around countless boxing events and we're often comparing the two, do you feel like the UFC show is more exciting than your typical big boxing event, or is it hard to compare in your opinion? Or maybe are you just, biased towards boxing because you've been a part of it for so long?
Well, the thing is, I think the boxing promoters maybe get a little bit lazy and been doing it so long and so forth. They don't. I think the UFC fight, everyone enjoys some part of the show, the music, the other fights, the undercard. Sometimes when we go with a real high-profile main event, and then the undercard is kind of weak. But like this show was a high-profile main event and a great undercard. I think everyone enjoyed the show. So I think this was a very good show.
You were one of the first people associated with George who said, yes, I believe he should come back. I'm in favor of this. I'm going to corner him, etc. Will you be in his corner from here on out? Like the next time he fights, regardless of weight, opponent, etc. Are you part of the team now? Are you going to be a fixture there in his corner for all his fights until he retires?
He's been asking me to be in the corner for a long, long time now, and I was always busy. I always had a very busy schedule, but for this time, when they made me come back, I made the time, and I made it work. And flying 3 days up there, 3 days back at my gym, and I have Miguel Cotto getting ready for a big fight coming up, and so forth. It's 3.5 weeks away, so I'm back in the gym right now with him. But I think, yes, I'll be in his corner for here on out. Yes.
If you had your way, would you prefer to see him go back down to 170 now?
Well, I want to just map out everything, and I think we all need to get together as a team, and I think we make that decision as a team decision, because I'm not the only one there, and I want to see what everyone else thinks and so forth, and what their thought patterns are on it. And there's always pluses and minuses in negotiation, and we have to work this out with Dana, of course, who's the promoter of the show. So I think that I won't make that decision myself. I think I need a little help with the other guys. I need to hear their input also, and George's input is the most important to me, though.
Sure. Do you have, though, obviously I know you're not as entrenched in MMA as you are in boxing, but do you have a scenario like, okay, I'd love to see him in this fight? Of course, the Conor fight is always talked about. That would have to be at a lower weight. But if you had your way, if George said to you, Freddie, what would you like to see? What would be your response?
I think I would like to go to the lower weight division, or back to the weight that he's more comfortable with. It seems like I'm more used to. But the thing is, possibly that might not be available at this point. So the thing is, we do have to work that out with the promoter and with everyone. And because one thing about UFC, usually what they say goes. And so,
right.
Conor McGregor wants to be the boss now, and wants to be the promoter or co-promoter, from what I've read about him and so forth. But he does have a contract, and I'm sure he has to follow it like everyone else.
Considering the success on Saturday, are you interested now in working with more MMA fighters?
I'm always interested in working with anyone that would come to me and wants to improve their boxing ability. I mean, I've learned a lot about the ground game, and I've learned more all the time, because this I have to study, because it's part of the MMA world, UFC world, and part of George's world, and I have to work a little differently, yes, but I do work with a lot of UFC fighters, and I've done a lot of work in the past. I've worked with over like 30 or 40 MMA fighters in my gym, and I have a couple kids in my gym right now. Actually, Aaron Pico trains here every day, and right. He's one of my better students at this point.
When you're working with a Pico or GSP, an MMA fighter, is the technique that you're working on, that you're focusing on, is it different than when you're working with a Cotto or a Pacquiao, because they have to be cognizant of knees and elbows and takedowns, kicks, things like that? Is it the same kind of boxing technique, or do you have to adapt it to MMA because they have to worry about so much?
I have to adapt it to MMA, because that's why I have to. I've learned the sport a lot more in the ground game, and what's acceptable and what's not. And the boxing world, and I don't think the two sports mix that well, because I think whoever's rules you go by is going to be the winner. Unless maybe someone gets lucky and lands a shot early. But the thing is, I do have to change. I do have to train them a little bit differently. Yes, there is a difference.
And by the way, I mean, so right now with George, and I know you've been a part of his career for some time, but never like this entrenched in the training camp. Is there something about, I think he's the greatest of all time now, considering what he did, and to be around a guy who comes back after 4 years and does, what he did on Saturday is nothing short of remarkable. Was there something about his preparation, about just being around him as an athlete, as a pro, that surprised you, that really stood out to you? Just being around someone at his level, of his stature. Is there anything that really jumps out, as far as the experience of training a guy like him, arguably the GOAT in our sport?
Yeah, you know, it was a great experience working with him and being that close with him. It was really, really fun, and it was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot of new things, and being with, you know, for us and top guys, John Donahar, you're just a really bright guy in jiu-jitsu, and just being around these people was a great experience, and I hope to keep it going. Yes, it's a lot of fun, and it's a little bit different from boxing, yes, but the thing is, it is a combat sport, and you know, I like to help people, and the thing is, if I can help George, I will always do my best.
Last thing for you, Freddie. You know, it's such a great moment. I know George was a little bit banged up. He went to the hospital. Can you tell? Is he okay physically? And did you guys even have a chance to celebrate afterwards?
Yeah, we didn't. You know, we went, made sure everything's okay. Everything's great. You know, he had a couple cuts, one across the nose and one high on his forehead, and they took care of them. And everything's good. It's and then I went from there went to the airport and flew home. And right now I'm in my gym right now, getting ready to train a couple of my fighters.
Well, I'll let you go do that. Congratulations, Freddie. Really appreciate the time. It was so cool seeing you in his corner, you guys celebrating. It felt like, you know, you were gracing us with your presence, and that was a really cool thing considering all that you've done in the world of boxing. Appreciate your insight on this Monday morning, Freddie. And again, congratulations on the victory.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, there he is, the one and only Freddie Roach. How about that?